In this video, I'm going to walk through some of our go-to workflow plugins. Just like our other plugin recommendations for visual elements and dynamic data sources, these plugins are going to extend functionality and capability in your app. Now, remember, you might not need these plugins for your specific app, but they are ones that come up frequently with our own clients. So I'd like to showcase these here now so that you're aware they exist and how to get started with them. Also, keep in mind that they're not the only workflow plugins in the marketplace. If you head over to the plugins tab and click on add plugins in the upper right corner, you can search through the dozens, if not hundreds, of other workflow actions and event plugins that are available here to extend your app's capabilities, whatever's going to suit your needs. The ones that we'll be going over in this video are very popular, they're very consistent and reliable, so we want to showcase them here now. The first one that we're going to look at is the Tab Opener plugin. This is a very simple little plugin that lets you open up a page, a web page, in a new tab, okay? So I'm going to show you how this works. On our plugin demos page here, which by the way is the same page we have for our dynamic data source plugins, calendar tool, API connector, and so on. Further down on the page, we've got all of our examples for this video, and the first one is the tab opener. So you may have noticed that when you go to open up a new page, right, from a button click, an icon, a group, any visual element that can trigger a workflow, right, so let's do this here, the page is going to open up in the same window, okay? So whether I am navigating to an internal page using the go to page action, or if I'm navigating via the open an external website to go outside of my application, Bubble's going to change the window that the user is currently on to that page. There is no built-in action in the workflows to open up the page in a separate tab. And so that's exactly what this plugin is here for. And you can actually see this also has a close tab action as well. But the open in a new tab here, you can find this by going to plugins and then scroll down to where you see open in a new tab. You can also search for it to get there a little bit faster, open in a new tab, and then you'll put in the URL that you want to go in. And this can be used for both internal pages or external. So if I want to go to, google.com, I can type that in. You can obviously see it takes in dynamic data sources. Maybe I have the website stored in my database, or it's coming from an input on the page. However you need to supply it, it can be added in there. If you're looking to go to an internal page in your application, I highly recommend starting with this dynamic expression here, website home URL. This is a built-in expression that Bubble has. This is the root domain of your application, okay? So if you're on the free plan, your app's going to be hosted on a Bubble domain. So it's basically your id.bubbleapps.io. Or once you connect your application to a custom domain, this is your custom domain. The other great thing about this expression is that it includes version test in the URL if you are running the application on the development mode, versus if you're running the app in live mode, it's not going to include it. So this is a highly dynamic expression so that you don't have to worry about updating this whether you're on a custom domain or not, or whether you're in the test version of your application or not. Now, this is the root domain. So this is going to take you to the index of your application. If you're looking to go to a specific page in your app, you need to type in the page name. So if I have a page in my application called About, then I'll type in About like that. Or, let's say I have a page called Dashboard. If I have parameters, in my URL that I want to go to, I have to construct that URL here. Okay, you don't need to worry about the slash between this dynamic expression, which is the root domain, and your page name. Bubble will include that in this expression here. It's going to be at the very end. Okay, so the purpose of this is simply to open up your pages in a new tab. It works very well. And the benefit from this is that you can use any visual element or really any trigger of workflows to run this. Bubble does technically have a link element. Let me add this to this group here real quick. That does have the capability to open things in a new tab. And that could be everything you need, is this simple link element where you design the text however styled you want. You can link to an internal page or external, and you'll check this box. However, you're limited to the link element. If you wanted a group to trigger this, an image, a shape, right? Some other visual element, you wouldn't be able to do that because it's a completely different element. The link element is more like a text. You can also design it to look like a button as well. So you do have that option there, but if you're looking for more flexibility in terms of what the design is like for the trigger, then this plugin is fantastic for that. That's the Tab Opener plugin by this publisher right here. The next plugin that we're going to look at is air copy to clipboard. This is basically to get a copy to clipboard function. It's another simple one. You do have a few different ways of triggering the copy in your application. So if you want to go off of static text or dynamic text, if you want to go off of a specific element by ID, lots of different things that you can work with. I'm going to show you a simple example here for setting this up. So here, copy to clipboard, I've got another button. Again, this can be triggered by anything that triggers a workflow. And I'm just going to search for copy to clipboard from static text. And by static, it really just means that we supply the text in here in this input field, but I can type in a text. I can also insert dynamic data, or I can mix and match, both of these things here by constructing that. So I can pull values from my database if I wanted to say, hello, first name like that, or if it is a URL that I have saved to the database, or if it's coming from an input, we can copy to clipboard, and that way the user can paste using their keyboard or their right-click menu, just like they normally would for any website. You can also show an alert message to let the user know, hey, you've copied this to clipboard, because it is kind of an invisible element or an invisible action until they actually paste, okay? But it's a very simple function here to add that functionality. It's great if you're creating share links within your application. All right, so that is the copy to clipboard plugin. The next one is Stripe. This is a Bubble published plugin to handle the vast majority of Stripe functions. So all the common payment capabilities that Stripe offers, charging a user, creating a subscription, updating a payment method, collecting credit card information. There's lots of different things, as you can see here. Now, of course, you do need a Stripe account. You need to get your API keys to populate them here. Stripe has a test mode and a live mode as well, so you have separate keys for each environment. You can create a marketplace system, so there are actions in here that allow your merchants, right? So if you have buyers and sellers in your application, so your sellers to connect to your platform account so that they can sell through you. That way you can take fees out of that. There's a lot that you can do here. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is that a lot of people work with Stripe as their payment gateway. It's a very powerful, very application friendly type of platform. And Bubble's own plugin for it handles the vast majority of cases for working with payments. Now, if you need highly custom functionality with Stripe and the plugin doesn't cover everything, that is okay. I suggest you use the API connector instead to connect to the API yourself. You can always do that, right? But you can check out these actions here to get a sense of what's available to you. I would also recommend getting on the version 3 version of this plugin, because it does, it's more updated with Stripe's own API. You can find all of those actions. Let's see here. We've got a couple of examples within a specific category section of the workflows list. So subscribe to plan, let's say we have a button here. We want to find those here under payment. Okay, all of these actions are coming from Bubble's Stripe plugin. If you install other payment related plugins published by Bubble, they should show up in this list here. All right, if you're going to set up actions via the API workflow, they will show up under your plugins section, because the API connector is essentially seen as a separate plugin. Okay, so if I wanted to subscribe the user to a plan, I would go to the create subscription. Let's see if I can find it here in this list. Not a subscription item. That's an individual line item within the subscription I am trying to get to. Here we go. Subscribe the user to a plan. So lots of different, pre-built settings that you can select here. If I wanted this to be a new subscription, there would not be existing. So I would uncheck that. Once you have added your API keys to the plugin settings, your plans that you've set up in Stripe will show up here, and you can select them. You can also make this dynamic so that, one button can work with any plan, and you have design in your front end a way for the user to choose a specific plan, and you would insert dynamically that plan ID. You can set up the quantity, you can set up promotion codes, all sorts of things here with common subscription actions. If I wanted to do a one-time charge for a user, so these payments would go directly to you, directly to your Stripe balance. We'll go back to payments here and we'll say charge the user. That is the first action. Okay, so you'll add in your amount, whether that is a hard-coded number or if it's coming from some calculated value in the database or real-time on the page. You'll fill all of these out. If this is a charge that is happening between your users, right, from buyer to seller, and you are simply taking a fee, right, you can check this box and define the recipient. So the seller is the payee of this transaction, and you can insert your application fee that you want to take out of it, if you want to take anything out of it at all. So of course, there's a lot to know when it comes to integrating with the payment gateway, but this plugin makes a lot of the most common functions just out of the box, ready to go. As long as you have your account set up in Stripe and you've added in your API keys, you can start working with it. The next plugin that we'll look at here is DocSpring. So this is another service that you would be integrating with, where you create an account with DocSpring. They have various plans, and this is specifically for creating PDFs. You set up templates within the DocSpring dashboard. Okay, so that's outside of your application. You define the different fields that you want to have filled in dynamically, and each of those templates will come with a template ID. Those are generated by DocSpring. So you'll get all of that set up in DocSpring first. You'll add in your API keys. Again, DocSpring will generate that for you. They also have test versus live modes, so that you can, play around with sample documents versus creating PDFs that are against your plan's quota. So test versus live. And you can see that this plugin is very simple. It comes with two different actions: create PDF submission or retrieve a PDF submission. So let me just show you where you would find that under I believe it's under plugins actually here. So DocSpring, create PDF, you'll insert the template ID that you want to create the PDF for. And then however you set up your template, you'll pass in the data. So let's say you set up a simple invoice template in DocSpring, and you know that you created a field for the date of the invoice, for the recipient, name, for the recipient address. These keys need to match up how you set everything in the template area, and then these values are going to come from your app, right? So they could be static values, they could be dynamic, coming from your database or anything that's on the page, and you simply pass that over. Now, the result of this action, okay, is going to be that PDF. So you could save that file to your database. I could create a new thing. Let's say, for example, under application, I know I have a file field here for the resume, and just refer to the result of the previous step and go to that PDF file. And that filled in document, it populated the template, right? That new generated document is what will be saved here. You can also, of course, open up that document by opening an external website, or again, if you want to use that, open in a new tab so that they don't lose their place. You can also refer to the result of step 2, go to the PDF file and open it up that way. That way it's an instant, create and then see it. There might be a little bit of a delay depending on how big the template is, how much data is being passed over for that to generate, but sequencing it like this will make it really convenient for your users. Now, we really like working with this particular service. Let me remove these actions here for now. Because their template system makes it so that your PDFs are professionally formatted. You can add in headers and footers and page numbers, and it's always going to be consistent. If you wanted to work with DocSpring in a more custom way, you can also connect to it via API connector. Keep in mind that these actions here that Bubble has, they cover kind of the most common basic use case of this, but you can do more with DocSpring by connecting to other things they have available in their API via the API connector. We love this plugin because it really gets you set up out of the box quickly. Okay, DocSpring also handles legally binding e-signatures if you ever need to do that as well. You're not going to find that through these actions, but I did want to let you know that that is a capability that they have. So take a look at their pricing page. It's not the only PDF generator service that's out there, but it is one that is very compatible with Bubble. The next plugin we're going to look at is OneSignal. So if you need push notifications in your application, whether it's a web app or if you've wrapped your web application, this service works very well for that. So you do have to set up an account with OneSignal. You got to set up all of your notifications and the website that you want, the specific pages, or if you want them to be per user. There's keys that of course you have to add in here so it's connected to your account. But this service makes it really easy for you to send push notifications to your users. So if your app is very notification dependent, right, there's activity happening so that users can take certain actions, this is a great service to look into. one signal. This is also published by Bubble, so we know that it is a very reliable one. The next plugin that we're going to look at, and that we do have a little demo here for, is this one here, Hopscotch Step-by-Step Tours. Now, this is a great way for you to create a very quick walkthrough of your application, a way to introduce your users to, unique functions or screens in your app that might not be self-explanatory. Let me actually take you through the preview of what we've set up here before I take you into the backend editor. Right, so I have a button that is going to begin the tour, and then I have 3 separate groups for the tour to navigate me through. And the idea is that the tour is going to allow me to step through one screen at a time and basically teach me how to use these features, whatever they might be, or point certain things out in my app. So if I click on this button, you see these 3 groups over here. It's going to start me off with step 1. Welcome to the tour. This is step 1. I have control over the way that the number is labeled. I have control over the content. I have control over what the button content is going to look like, the positioning of this tooltip here, right? And when I click on next, it's going to take me to the next step. I've also customized this content. I can go back and forth, okay? And once I hit the very end, it stops. You have many other actions that you can control around the timing, but that's essentially the basics of what this plugin is for you to set up very quickly those kind of tooltips. Now, I didn't design those elements on the page. The plugin actually did that for me. All I have to do is set up the content and the positioning. Okay, so here is how it works. On the page, actually, let's look at the description of the plugin. We get an element, a visual element that we have to add to the page. It's actually invisible to the user, but you do have to add it to the page called tour. That will help configure the code behind the scenes. And you have various trigger events to control your tour. Once a tour has started, once it's finished, if somebody, abandons the tour before they finished it, right? You can trigger different workflows for all these things. And then you have basically the creation of the tour. And, if you want to reset it, of course, happening here in the actions. So the first thing that I've done when the user clicks on begin tour is we build the tour. Okay. We're going to have separate actions for each step of the tour. We can find that again under plugins. And then, under element actions here under the tour category. And this is here because of that visual element that we have to add to the page. This element right here, tour A, you can find that under your, let me see if I think it's the visual elements list. Yes, right here, visual elements at the bottom, tour. So I've added this to the screen. Nobody's going to see this little square, but it does have to be there. You have a number of different customizations that you can play around with here. And I know that this is going to be 3 steps, so I'm going to set up my labels 1, 2, 3. You can see the documentation asks that everything is comma separated. And so when I click on begin tour, I can find all of my actions under the element actions here, okay, to build out my tour. So I have to build it out first before it starts. So you could do this either from a button click like this or even just when the page first loads. But I've added my first instance of this add step action to set up step 1. Okay, so the visual element is tour A. In theory, you could have multiple tours on the page if you wanted. By adding multiple instances of this element, okay? I want to identify the element the tooltip should show up next to by an ID. So here the ID is step 1. I've typed this in and I've just made this up. You do not have to word it this way, right? This could be by colors if you want, green, blue, purple, yellow. It could be by names. It's not dynamic. As you can see, I can't insert dynamic data. I do have to hard code the ID. But whatever ID you come up with, that's the ID that you need to associate with the element that the tooltip is going to be by. So in this case, it's this kind of orange-yellow group. And at the bottom, I've added the ID attribute of step 1. Now, this element can communicate with this action. The action knows where to position the tooltip. If you don't see that field at the bottom of your elements here to add the ID attribute, go over to your settings, then to general. About halfway down the page, you're going to see a setting for expose the option to add an ID attribute. Just make sure you check that box, and that will reveal that field for you at the very bottom of the property editor. You'll find that on almost any visual element. Okay, so on buttons, you can see this. On text, you can see this. So sometimes folks will set up these tours the tooltips to appear next to icons, like little question mark icons or info icons, as opposed to entire groups, but it's really up to you, however you want to do it. Okay, so going back to the setup for step 1, we've added the content for the title, the rest of the content. This is a bit smaller in font size. You have some override settings that you would otherwise control at this level here with the visual element. Okay, so you can override them per step if you'd like. You can set up different placement, preferences here for where that tooltip shows up. You can also even create a delay here. So I've done the same thing for step 2, right? Step 2 is this ID. It's different content. Step 3, a different ID and other content. And as long as my 3 groups have these IDs, step 1, step 2, step 3, they match, then the tooltip will know where to place those, or I should say the plugin will know where to place the tooltips. And so what I've done is I've built out the tour, and then immediately after I'll start. You do have to build it out before you start, okay? So keep that in mind. Starting will trigger the very first tooltip to show up automatically. Okay, so again, remember, I did not design this on the front end. Everything's just been set up here. If you prefer to have more control over how things look, then you can just custom design your own tour. You have all the capability to generate your own sequence of actions with buttons and groups and positioning them. But this plugin is fantastic for getting something like this out of the box, up and running very quickly. Okay, we do have a folder here to show you different capabilities that you can work with. So once we begin, we build the tour, we hit start. Let's see, once it's started, I'm going to actually close this because we're not actually using this here. You do have different triggers, right? So if you go to under the elements category, you have different triggers for various workflows. Once the tour has started, maybe we want to create something in the database, some behind the scenes status change. Once it's finished, maybe we want to change something as well or show an alert message. If they abandon the tour before it's finished, right? If they've moved to the next step or the previous step, you can keep track of everything by updating your database if you'd like, or show other alert messages. You have a lot of control there. What I've done here is when the tour has moved on to the next step, and we're currently on step 3, okay, so we have access to the current step. The tour will keep track of that. This tour's step number, right? This is built into the plugin, this state here. If it's number 3, and I've just typed that in, then I want to end the tour. It's done. I know that's the last step, and so I want to finish it. I don't want to be kind of hanging around there thinking that it's still going. Okay, so that's a great plugin for getting kind of a welcome onboarding sequence up and running with some design controls as well for you. The next plugin we're going to look at is this 1T CSV uploader. This is a fantastic plugin if you are working with importing data, or your users are importing data from CSVs where you may not know the exact structure of their columns or how they label their column headers, and you want to give them the ability to map those column headers to your internal fields in your application. Okay, so again, this is for importing data via CSV. And this is how it works. Let me refresh the page here. Let's say that a user is coming in with some sample data, and they want to import a list of search terms that they may have from a previous system. And there is a list of queries, and they have a certain count, right? They've previously had a certain metric associated with them. And we want that to be imported into our internal database. Let's head over here to this data type called search term. We have 2 fields, one for account, one for query. Now, this CSV is set up with the exact same labeling for those column headers. So what the user is going to see is that the plugin is going to automatically map those fields because it detects the same names, which is really nice. The user doesn't have to do very much. So I'm going to first select my CSV. I've already downloaded it right here. And the plugin is going to detect my column headers for my CSV and match them with the fields in my database. And we know that they're matched because we have this green link here. Now, let's say that I change my labels to search term and we'll say number of times searched, right? They have kind of their own system for labeling things. I'm going to download this updated CSV version, okay, right here. And I'm going to now change my file here to this new version. And you're going to see here now the plugin isn't finding an exact match, so it can't automatically link them. So now it's up to the user through this interface that is handled by the plugin, right? I did not design this interface here. It's up to the user to choose, all right, what does search term align with, in terms of our internal database? So search term for me aligns with the query. Now it's linked. Number of times search aligns with the count. Now it's linked. This is a really popular type of feature if you're building some kind of a CRM system where your users are wanting to import all of their contacts from a previous system, or maybe historical transaction data. You've got dates and descriptions, all of that sort of thing, categories. And the idea is to get their data into your application. So the setup for this plugin is that you're going to add this element here, the CSV uploader. We can find it right here under Visual Elements again, CSV uploader. And the interface for generating the fields and being able to do the drop down to link all happens for you. All you have to do is create the labels for the fields that you want to map to. Maybe we're working with a data type that has dozens of fields and we don't necessarily want to involve all of them. So you have control over which fields are participating in this. And you can give the fields different names if you prefer the user to see it labeled a different way in that dropdown compared to how you have it internally labeled in your data structure. So the labels should match exactly as they are in your, actually I might have these reversed. Sorry, yes, the labels are the custom human-friendly labels versus the names should be an exact match to your data structure. And you can also read the descriptions here to make sure that we're going in the right direction there. And you do have to provide a reference to the file itself. So I have a Bubble file uploader. This is not part of the plugin. This piece here is just Bubble's own file uploader that I've added so that the user can select their file, and then the plugin is going to read that file through this setting here. And what it will do is extract all that content in order to display those fields, and they can do the mapping. You also have a couple of other custom settings here that you can work with if you're going to have a more advanced integration like this. Now, once the user has completed this and they want to upload, and in fact, I think I have this not set up too tall. Let's make this a little bit taller. 600 pixels here. And let me see if I can open this up. There's actually an upload button. It's currently getting cut off. That should upload the file. That way the plugin knows, okay, this column in their custom CSV belongs to this field in the Bubble database, and so on. That way you can then trigger your own internal upload action to the app. There we go. So there is our button that we were missing. So again, I'll map these here. And then once I hit upload, the plugin will update the file essentially. And in the workflow, you want to trigger this event right here. The CSV uploader has generated a new file. So it is going to convert their file to a new file so that it matches, right? All the mapping has happened. And you can find that under Elements, and here a CSV uploader generates a new file. And from there, you can upload that data from the CSV's new file to add to your database. Now, there's a lot of strategy that you can employ around all of this, especially around different sized files. The plugin can actually batch your original CSV into multiple files. So here we've got a default batch size of 100, which means that every file is going to be limited to 100 rows. So if the user comes in with 1,000 rows and you set it up to 100 batch size, then you're going to get 10 files out of that, right? 10 files each with 100 rows. That way you have 1,000 total, 1,000 rows all accounted for. That's why also when you go to reference the CSV uploader's files, you actually get a list of files. Maybe you end up with only one, maybe you have more than one, but the list will, take care of all scenarios there. You also have a couple of other states available to you. It will calculate the number of files, calculate the total number of records that have been processed. Okay, so if you're using this together with the upload data action to create that data, then just be mindful that this particular action does have limits on the number of rows it'll create based on your plan. If you're on the free plan, you actually won't be able to use this. You do have to be on a at least the first paid plan, which I believe the first limit is 100 rows per action. Okay, so you could run multiple instances of this action, especially in a backend workflow and kind of a recursive loop, just cycling through every file set up to a batch of 100 to get, as many records as you want created, and you don't have to upgrade to, all those higher plans. There's a lot of strategy around that you can work with. Okay, you may also not need to upload the data itself. Maybe it's just a matter of importing the files and splitting it up. This plugin also works just for that. And you can take the list of files and save them directly to a file field in your database if you'd like. But that is a great way to create a mapping interface, especially when you don't know the structure of an incoming CSV. Another way around that whole system, by the way, is for you to offer a template CSV for your users to download and then get their data in there. That it's not always the most convenient, which is why this plugin is set up in this way, especially when there's a lot of data involved. All right, the next plugin we're going to look at is related, actually. It is a file downloader. So whereas previous we were uploading files, here we want to have a way to download the file to the user's device. This is a very simple, straightforward plugin. We're going to go to the setting for it so you can see where it is. File downloader, just one action to download file. And you can see here all you need when you trigger it, again, from a button, an icon, a text, a shape, a group, whatever it is going to run this action here, and you simply refer to the file itself. So that can be a static URL to a file that lives in your app. It lives outside of your app, doesn't really matter. Wherever it's hosted, that URL goes there. Or you can reference something in your database, a file field, or you can reference, like I have here, the file uploader. Whatever file's been uploaded, I also want to download it. That's what I've done. And you can also change the file name, and that's just going to go directly to your database. So I'm going to click on this button so we can see this in action. So here you can see there's the file name that was configured. If I hit save, that's what gets downloaded, and it's essentially, in this case, the same file that I've uploaded already. Right, so very lightweight plugin for downloading files because Bubble actually doesn't have a native action for that sort of thing. The last plugin that we'll be looking at, and we've mentioned this before for other plugins, is the Toolbox plugin. So again, this is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of functions here. They're all kind of standalone, but the ones that we're going to be looking at for this one today is the Run JavaScript action. So this is more advanced. If you need to inject JavaScript or run JavaScript in your application, this is going to get the job done. Okay, running JavaScript will output results that you can also access with the JavaScript to Bubble element. Okay, so they can kind of communicate with each other, as well as the event here, the JavaScript to Bubble event. So let me actually show you a preview of a little JavaScript script that we've added to this application. When I click on this button, I have a little script that is going to generate a random number. And I want to display that random number in an alert message. So I'll click on this button. There's my number, 36.75. If I click on it again, it's just running a script to, just generate a random number with a math function. Okay, so in my design, I've added the JavaScript to Bubble instance. Let me show you where that is. Right here, JavaScript to Bubble. That is this element here. It is invisible to the user, but it does have to be on the page in order for me to access the result, the output of the JavaScript. Okay, so a couple of things happening here. The only way that the script itself is going to be able to communicate with anything on my page, I have to set up a function. Okay, so again, if you're not familiar with JavaScript, if you don't plan on working with it, you can skip over this. But if you are looking to add JavaScript to your app, it's going to be very helpful to know how to set this up. So the Bubble function is always going to have bubble underscore fn for function, underscore your suffix that you add here. Okay, so I've just typed in the word random. Okay, I can type in whatever I want, or it can be dynamic. And before I go to these settings here, I'm going to show you when I click on this button, let's go to this folder that I've created. It's going to trigger this action, run JavaScript. Okay, so I can find that under plugins, and I will see right there, run JavaScript. And here I have my very simple math random value, right? It's going to just generate a random number for this constant, this a variable here. And I want, once that has been calculated, to pass that value A, to my element identified by bubble fn random. Okay, so I typed in random there because that's how I set it up in the visual element. Now, the visual element is also set up to trigger a workflow event. Once it has output a value, I want it to trigger a workflow event. So I check this box, and the event is this one right here, JavaScript to bubble event. And we can find that under the elements action, and should be, yes, right there, JavaScript to bubble. Excuse me. So once this has triggered, I want to show my alert message. Okay, my alert message is simply going to display the value of my random number. Okay, so I just typed in, you generated the number, and I'm going to go to that visual element, JavaScript to bubble, that's right here, and that's going to go to the value. Now, this function generates a number between 0 and 1. It's a decimal, so I want to have it be a bigger number, so I'm just multiplying by 0, and I'm rounding it down to 2 decimal places. So I'm manipulating that value a little bit, but it is still working off of that random number. Okay, now the only way that I can access that value is if I also tell Bubble to publish the value and tell Bubble what type of value it is. This may not be a number, it could be a text, it could be a list of things, right? So, your JavaScript can be very complex, it can be much more advanced. I've got a very simple example here just to show you how everything communicates. So this is setting up what I want to get out of the JavaScript, how to have that JavaScript communicate with my element here, okay, with the suffix. And when I click on this button, it's going to run the script, okay, as long as I'm referencing my function, it will trigger the event, and then I can do whatever I want from here. In this case, I happen to be showing an alert message, but you can update your database, you can do other things in your application. And the message itself is also referencing the value. To show me that output. Okay, so again, triggers the script, which triggers the event, and then we show the alert message to show that value that was generated from the script. All right, so that's a number of really popular workflow-based plugins to help extend functionality. There's a lot that you can do from all of these here. These are some of the most popular. Some of these are more for just getting you up and running quickly. Some of them you can build out yourself using Bubble native elements with a little bit more creativity and time. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. You, of course, have more control if you do it that way. But if you're looking for something quick, some of these things like the Hopscotch tours or using the Bubble Stripe plugin to get things running out of the box can be big time savers for you. All right, everyone, happy building.